Congratulations! You've just stepped off the dusty stagecoach into a frontier town somewhere in the American West, circa 1875. The good news? You're alive after 3 bone-jarring days of travel. The bad news? You're about to discover what personal hygiene really means when there's no running water, no soap that won't burn your skin off, and no concept that bathing should happen more than once a week. Take a deep breath. Actually, don't. That overwhelming stench isn't coming from the cattle pens or the leather tannery. It's coming from you and everyone else. Welcome to an era where body odor is considered as natural as sunrise, where 20 cowboys share the same increasingly murky wash water, and where a refreshing bath after 10 days without one is described as pure luxury. You might be thinking this is going to be like those Hollywood westerns you've seen. You know, ruggedly handsome cowboys with perfect teeth and mysteriously clean shirts riding into sunset-kissed towns where everyone looks like they just stepped out of salon. Well, surprise, you're about to learn that the real Wild West was less Magnificent Seven and more malodorous multitudes. Let's start with your immediate surroundings. That saloon you're eyeing? The one with the swinging doors and the promise of cold beer? Step inside and you'll be greeted by a fog of tobacco smoke, spilled alcohol, and something else, the distinctive aroma of men who haven't properly bathed in months. See that grimy towel hanging behind the bar? Every patron uses it to wipe beer foam from their mustache. The same towel, all day, every day, until it's stiff enough to stand up by itself. The main street you're standing on isn't paved with good intentions. It's paved with horse manure, tobacco juice, and the occasional contents of chamber pots that miss their intended targets. Those charming wooden sidewalks? They're elevated not for style, but because the street doubles as an open sewer during rainy season. And speaking of rain, when it comes, this entire dusty paradise transforms into a muddy hellscape where water-resistant means absolutely nothing. But here's the thing that would shock you most. Nobody thinks this is particularly abnormal. In 1875, the average American bathes once a week if they're fancy, once a month if they're practical, and once a season if they're busy staying alive. The concept that daily washing might be healthy, let alone socially expected, is still decades away from becoming mainstream American thinking. You're living in an era where water is precious, soap is harsh, and privacy is a luxury that most people can't afford. Where families of 8 share a single wooden tub on Saturday nights, passing the same increasingly murky water from father to mother to children in strict order of importance. Where by the time little Susie gets her turn, she's essentially bathing in a soup of everyone else's accumulated grime. And this is just town life. Wait until you hear about the cowboys. Those romantic figures of American mythology, they spend 3 to 6 months at a time on cattle drives, carrying everything they own in saddlebags that definitely don't have room for spare clothes or bathing supplies. The chuck wagon that feeds 20 men has exactly 1 tin basin for washing. If you're lucky enough to be first in line, you might splash relatively clean water on your face. If you're 20th, you're basically smearing mud around and calling it hygiene. Frank Clifford, who rode with some of the most famous outlaws of the era, described the reality with brutal honesty. Cowboys developed such a distinctive smell that townspeople could detect their approach from a mile away. A potent and distinctive smell following them and wafting through the air. That's not poetry. That's a man describing what 3 months without soap does to the human body. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about your teeth. You know, those things in your mouth that you've been brushing twice daily your entire modern life? Forget everything you know about oral hygiene. Toothbrushes are rare curiosities that most people have never seen. Toothpaste won't be invented until 1873, and even then, it'll take decades to reach frontier towns. Your dental care routine will consist of picking food out of your teeth with a knife, the same knife you use for eating, whittling, and occasional self-defense. When your teeth start causing serious problems, and they will, your options are limited to exactly one: extraction. And the person doing the extracting? Probably the local blacksmith. After all, he's got the tools and the upper body strength necessary to rip a stubborn molar out of your skull. Anesthesia? That's what whiskey is for. Dental hygiene? That's what accepting your fate is for. Now let's discuss your wardrobe. See that outfit you're wearing? Congratulations, it's probably the only one you own. Maybe you've got a spare shirt if you're prosperous, but most frontier folks wear the same clothes until they literally fall apart. That means your wool pants, cotton shirt, and whatever undergarments you've managed to acquire will be marinated in your own sweat, dust, and the general grime of frontier life for months at a time. Laundry day happens when it absolutely must. Usually when your clothes can stand up by themselves, or when social pressure becomes unbearable. The process is so labor-intensive that many frontier families designate entire days to it, hauling dozens of gallons of water, chopping mountains of firewood, and spending hours scrubbing clothes with soap so harsh it'll take the skin off your knuckles along with stains. And if you happen to be a woman, well, congratulations on drawing the short straw of human existence. Not only do you get to deal with all the hygiene challenges that men face, but you get to do it while wearing multiple layers of heavy clothing that trap heat and moisture, managing monthly cycles with cloth rags that you wash and reuse, and maintaining the fiction that you're this civilizing influence on the frontier while secretly knowing you smell just as bad as everyone else. But here's what makes this whole experience even more surreal. People adapt. They find ways to cope, to maintain dignity, to create communities and relationships, and even romance in conditions that would send modern humans running for the nearest luxury spa. They develop hierarchies around cleanliness, create innovations with the limited resources available, and somehow manage to build the foundation of what will eventually become modern America. So buckle up, partner. You're about to experience life when staying clean was a full-time job, when bad hygiene could literally kill you, and when the difference between civilization and barbarism could be measured in buckets of hot water and bars of homemade lye soap. It's going to be dirty, uncomfortable, and occasionally horrifying. But it's also going to be the adventure of a lifetime. Now, shall we talk about your first Saturday night bath? Chapter 1. Saturday night and the family bath ritual. You thought I was kidding about that Saturday night bath, didn't you? Well, congratulations. You're about to participate in the most elaborate weekly ceremony of frontier life. Think of it as church, Christmas morning, and a medieval ordeal all rolled into one sudsy, hierarchical nightmare. It's Saturday evening, and the entire household is buzzing with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for wedding days or public hangings. Why? Because tonight is the night when your frontier family transforms from a group of walking biological weapons into something approaching civilized human beings. Well, sort of. First, let's talk logistics, because Saturday night bathing isn't something that just happens. It's a military operation that requires the kind of planning usually associated with cross-continental migrations. Remember, there's no turning a handle and getting hot water. Every single drop has to be carried by hand from the well, the creek, or whatever water source your family has managed to locate within a reasonable walking distance. And reasonable is relative when you're looking at hauling 15 to 20 gallons of water. That's roughly 150 pounds of liquid that someone, probably you, is going to carry bucket by bucket from wherever water lies to wherever your family has decided bathing is going to happen. Your arms are going to ache, your back is going to scream, and you haven't even started heating the water yet. Because here's the thing about frontier water. It comes straight from the ground or the creek at whatever temperature nature has decided to provide. In summer, that might be tolerably cool. In winter, it's going to be cold enough to make you question every life choice that led you to this moment. So now you need fire. Lots of fire. Welcome to the great firewood consumption event of the week. Heating enough water for a family bath requires burning through wood like you're planning to signal the cavalry. The big iron kettle hanging over your fire pit, assuming your family is prosperous enough to own such a luxury, can hold maybe 5 gallons of water. That means multiple trips, multiple heating sessions, and enough wood consumption to deforest a small grove. And while all this preparation is happening, your family is engaged in the complex social negotiations that determine the sacred order of bathing. This isn't democratic. This isn't fair. This is frontier hierarchy in its purest form. and you're about to learn exactly where you rank in the household pecking order. Pa goes first. Always. This isn't up for discussion, debate, or democratic vote. Pa gets the clean water, the hottest water, and the largest towel. Why? Because Pa is the one who built this house, chopped the wood, dug the well, and maintains the general fiction that he's protecting everyone from the various dangers of frontier life. Pa has earned his clean water through the simple expedient of being the biggest, strongest person in the house who can make everyone else's life miserable if they object. You watch as Pa settles into the wooden tub, a precious piece of furniture that probably cost more than everything else your family owns combined. The water comes up to his chest, and for about 15 minutes, he transforms from a walking advertisement for soap into something approaching a human being. He scrubs with the family's bar of homemade lye soap, using a rough cloth that's been designated for bathing and nothing else. Here's where it gets interesting. That water doesn't get changed. When Pa climbs out, dripping and slightly pinker than when he went in, the tub still contains what used to be clean water, but is now Pa-flavored soup. And guess what? That's where Ma is going next. Ma approaches the tub with the resigned dignity of someone who understands that frontier life involves a series of compromises with ideal circumstances. The water is cooler now, definitely less clean, and has acquired a distinctly human flavor, but it's still water, and it's still Saturday night, and bathing is still happening whether the water is pristine or not. Ma's bathing ritual is more efficient than Pa's. She's got practice making the best of suboptimal situations. She washes quickly but thoroughly, using the same bar of soap that's now seen 2 people and is getting smaller by the minute. When she's done, the water has taken on a definitely murky quality that suggests it's been places and seen things. But we're not done. Oh no, we're just getting started. Now comes the children, and this is where the true horror of frontier bathing reveals itself. The kids go in order of age, oldest to youngest, each one inheriting increasingly questionable water from their predecessor. By the time you get to little Jimmy, the baby of the family, that tub contains what can generously be described as human broth. Picture this. The water that started the evening as clear, hot liquid has now been home to 4 or 5 people. It's cooled to room temperature, acquired a distinctly brownish tint, and developed a texture that suggests it might be approaching the consistency of thin gravy. The soap has been worn down to a sliver that keeps slipping out of wet hands and has to be fished out of the murky depths. And little Jimmy? He's going in anyway, because Saturday night is bath night, and bath night happens regardless of water quality, temperature, or the fact that the alleged cleaning liquid now contains enough human residue to qualify as soup. But here's the truly remarkable thing. Somehow, this system works. Everyone emerges from their turn in the tub cleaner than when they went in, even if that's a relatively low bar to clear. The accumulation of a week's worth of frontier living, the dust, the sweat, the various substances that accumulate when you live in close proximity to livestock and open fires, gets scrubbed away, even if it's being scrubbed away with water that previous bathers have already used. The used bathwater doesn't go to waste because nothing goes to waste on the frontier. That murky liquid gets saved for laundry, for scrubbing floors, for watering the vegetable garden, because water that's too dirty for bathing is still perfectly good for everything else. And the tub? That precious wooden vessel gets dried carefully and stored away until next Saturday, when the entire ritual will repeat itself with the kind of religious devotion that other cultures reserve for actual religious ceremonies. By the time the last person has been baptized in the communal bath water, the entire family has achieved something approaching respectability. You're clean enough for Sunday church services, clean enough for any social interactions the weekend might bring, and clean enough to maintain the fiction that you're civilized people living civilized lives in a decidedly uncivilized place. Welcome to Frontier Family Bonding, where shared bath water creates shared experiences and nobody complains about the accommodations because everyone understands that the alternative to murky water is no water at all. But this weekly ritual is luxury compared to what awaits you if you ever decide to join a cattle drive. Chapter 2. Cowboys in the Months Without Washing. So you think that Saturday night family bath routine sounds rough? Well, partner, let me tell you about life when even that weekly ritual becomes a distant, impossible dream. Because you've just made the monumentally poor decision to sign up for a cattle drive, and you're about to discover what happens when 20 men spend 3 to 6 months together with exactly one tin basin between them. Welcome to the romantic life of the American cowboy, Hollywood's favorite myth and hygiene's greatest nightmare. It's dawn on your first day out of Abilene, and you're looking at 3 months of driving 2,500 head of cattle from Kansas to Montana. The trail boss has made it clear. You're carrying everything you own in your saddlebags, and those saddlebags need to hold ammunition, basic tools, maybe a spare shirt if you're lucky, and absolutely nothing that isn't essential for keeping you and the cattle alive. Soap? That's a luxury. Extra clothes? Pure fantasy. The concept of regular bathing? You just entered a world where such ideas don't exist. Your new mobile home is the Chuck Wagon, and it's going to be the center of your universe for the next several months. The cook, universally called Cookie regardless of his actual name, rules this domain with the iron fist of someone who controls the only food source for hundreds of miles. Cookie has allocated exactly 3 square feet of wagon space for washing facilities, and those facilities consist of 1 dented tin basin, 1 bar of lye soap that's going to have to last the entire drive, and 1 towel that's already seen better decades. Every morning, just as the sun starts painting the horizon, the wake-up call echoes across the camp. Come and get it. This isn't just about breakfast. It's also your only chance at what the cowboys generously call washing up. Picture this: 20 men, fresh from sleeping on the ground in clothes they've been wearing for days, all lined up waiting for their turn at that single tin basin. The water Cookie poured into it last night is cold, probably has a thin film of dust on top, and definitely isn't getting changed between users. You watch as Jake, the trail boss, splashes his face first. The water turns slightly gray. Then comes old Pete, who's been riding drag and eating dust for the past week. The water gets grayer. By the time it's your turn, and you're somewhere in the middle of this hygiene hierarchy, you're essentially washing your face in what could charitably be called cowboy soup. But here's the truly horrifying part: that communal towel. It started life as a piece of fabric, probably white or at least light-colored. Now it's achieved a color that doesn't exist in nature, a sort of brownish gray that suggests it's seen things no towel should see. It's stiff with accumulated dirt, grease, and the facial residue of 19 other men. When you rub on your face, you're not sure if you're getting cleaner or just redistributing grime in more artistic patterns. And this is the high point of cowboy hygiene. This is as clean as you're going to get for the next 24 hours. Your clothes are becoming a science experiment in human endurance. That shirt you put on back in civilization, it's now marinated in your sweat, dust from the trail, smoke from the campfire, and the distinctive aroma of cattle. Your pants have achieved a level of stiffness that suggests they could stand up and walk around without you in them. And your underwear, assuming you're wearing any, has transcended its original purpose and become something approaching a biological hazard. After 2 weeks on the trail, you've stopped noticing your own smell, which is probably a mercy because everyone around you has achieved the same aromatic state. Frank Clifford wasn't exaggerating when he described cowboys as having a potent and distinctive smell following them and wafting through the air. You've become a walking advertisement for the need for soap, and you don't even realize it because everyone else smells exactly the same. The cattle don't seem to mind, but then again, cattle aren't known for their refined sensibilities. Your hair has become a work of art. If art could be made from dust, grease, and the occasional insect that decided to make a home there, you've given up any pretense of combing it, partly because you don't own a comb and partly because anything you stuck in there might get permanently lost. Your hat isn't just a fashion statement anymore. It's a structural necessity that keeps the wildlife in your scalp from escaping. River crossings provide the only opportunities for anything approaching real bathing, but these are rare and fraught with complications. When you do find a suitable stream, the cattle take priority. They need water to survive, and your job is keeping them alive, not keeping yourself clean. If you're lucky, you might get a few minutes to splash around while the herd is drinking, but this usually means stripping down in front of 19 other men who are equally desperate for a wash. Privacy? That's another one of those concepts that doesn't exist on the trail. You sleep within arm's reach of the next cowboy. You eat together, you work together, and when nature calls, you find the nearest bush and hope nobody's looking. Modesty becomes another luxury you can't afford when survival is the only priority that matters. The psychological effects of this extended uncleanliness are almost as challenging as the physical ones. You start having dreams about baths, about soap, about clean clothes. You catch yourself thinking about your mother's Saturday night bathing ritual with the kind of nostalgia usually reserved for lost loves. That murky family bathwater you once complained about now seems like the height of luxury. But the worst part isn't the discomfort. It's the gradual realization that you're adapting. After 6 weeks on the trail, you've stopped thinking about cleanliness as a daily necessity. It's become something you'll worry about when you reach civilization, whenever that might be. You've entered a state of acceptance that would horrify your former self, but feels perfectly natural in the context of keeping cattle alive across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. And then, finally, after 3 months of this aromatic nightmare, you see it on the horizon. The outline of a real town with real buildings and, most importantly, real bathhouses. The entire crew suddenly straightens up in their saddles because everyone knows what's coming next. You're about to discover what desperation smells like when it meets opportunity. Chapter 3: The Soap-Making Ordeal. You've barely had time to savor the fantasy of that distant bathhouse when reality comes crashing back like a bucket of cold water to the face. Because before you can appreciate the luxury of commercial bathing establishments, you need to understand where soap actually comes from on the frontier. Spoiler alert, it's not delivered by cheerful shopkeepers in clean aprons. Welcome to Soap-Making Day, an event so horrific that frontier families schedule it only twice a year and consider it roughly equivalent to a natural disaster that you have to inflict upon yourself. It's early spring, and your family has spent the entire winter preparing for this moment with the kind of grim determination usually reserved for preparing for war. Every piece of hardwood ash from your fireplace has been carefully saved in wooden barrels. Every scrap of fat from butchered animals has been stored in crocks, slowly turning rancid and developing an aroma that would make a skunk reconsider its life choices. You're about to participate in a chemical process that's remained essentially unchanged since biblical times, and there's a reason people back then considered it borderline magical. You're going to turn wood, ash, and animal fat into soap, and the journey is going to be more unpleasant than the destination. First, let's talk about lye. Not the convenient, measured chemicals you might imagine, but real frontier lye made from wood, ash, and water in a process that combines chemistry with guesswork and ratios that would terrify any modern safety inspector. Your family has been saving oak, hickory, and ashwood ashes all winter. Pine and other softwood ashes won't work, because frontier families learn through painful trial and error that the wrong kind of ash produces the wrong kind of lye, which produces no soap at all. The ash barrel sits outside your cabin like a monument to delayed gratification. Months of carefully preserved ashes, protected from rain and snow, waiting for the day when they'll be transformed into something useful. Today is that day, and you're about to learn why soap making is considered women's work. Not because men aren't capable, but because men are smart enough to find pressing business elsewhere when soap-making day arrives. You start by creating a leaching barrel, essentially a wooden container with holes drilled in the bottom, lined with straw to prevent the ash from falling through. The ashes go in, and then comes the water. Lots of water. The liquid that drips out the bottom is lye, a caustic substance capable of eating through skin, fabric, and your faith in the idea that hygiene is worth this much trouble. Testing lye strength requires a technique passed down through generations of frontier women who learned it from their mothers, going back to women who figured this out through what must have been some truly painful experimentation. You drop an egg into the lye solution. If it floats with a surface area about the size of a quarter showing above the liquid, your lye is ready. If it sinks, you need stronger lye. If it dissolves completely, your lye is strong enough to strip paint, and you need to dilute it before it strips your skin. But we're just getting started. Now comes the fat. Remember all that animal fat your family has been saving? The stuff that's been sitting in crocks, slowly decomposing and achieving new heights of olfactory offense? Time to render it. This involves heating rancid fat in large iron kettles until it melts, straining out the bits of meat and gristle that have been festering in there, and creating what technically qualifies as clean fat, but smells like something died and then died again. The actual soap making happens outside, because attempting this process indoors would likely result in your family evacuating the cabin and not returning until spring. You combine 12 pounds of rendered fat with the lye in a massive iron kettle suspended over an outdoor fire. This isn't a gentle simmer. This is serious cooking that requires constant stirring with a long wooden paddle for hours at a time. The stirring can't stop. If you stop stirring, the mixture separates and you get to start over with new fat and new lye, assuming you haven't lost the will to live by this point. Your arms ache, your back screams, and the smell emanating from the kettle suggests that you're cooking something that died of natural causes several weeks ago. After hours of stirring, something miraculous happens. The mixture begins to thicken and change texture. It's becoming soap, though calling it soap requires a very generous definition of the term. What you're creating is a harsh, caustic cleanser that will remove dirt, skin, hair, and possibly small articles of clothing if you're not careful with it. When the soap-making gods smile upon your efforts, you can test readiness by dropping a small amount on a wooden surface. If it hardens quickly and doesn't leave a greasy residue, congratulations, you've created frontier soap. If it remains liquid or leaves oil stains, you get to keep stirring until your arms fall off or the mixture achieves the proper consistency, whichever comes first. The finished product gets poured into wooden molds or flat pans to cool and harden. What emerges is brown or gray soap that looks like something you might use to clean wagon wheels and smells like a combination of wet ashes and deceased livestock. This is what passes for personal care products on the frontier, and your family will use it for everything from washing clothes to washing bodies to washing dishes. Using this soap is an adventure in pain tolerance. It's so caustic that it removes dirt by essentially burning through the top layer of whatever it touches. Your skin will turn red, develop a burning sensation, and feel worse after washing than it did before. Many frontier families developed permanent rashes and skin conditions from regular use of their homemade soap, but the alternative was staying dirty, which wasn't socially acceptable even in an era with relaxed hygiene standards. Smart frontier families learned to add wood ash or sand to their soap mixture to create abrasive cleaning bars specifically for laundry and heavy-duty cleaning, saving the slightly less harsh versions for personal use. Some families experimented with adding rendered bear fat or other animal fats to create different soap textures, though these experiments sometimes produced results that were worse than the original problem. The truly fortunate frontier families discovered what Mexican women and Native Americans had known for centuries. Yucca plants provided a superior alternative to this chemical warfare masquerading as soap. Soapweed, made by crushing yucca roots with water, created a gentle cleanser that actually left hair and skin feeling clean rather than chemically burned. Frank Clifford's description of having his hair washed with soapweed root many times suggests that cowboys who learned this technique from Mexican and Native American women considered themselves lucky indeed. But for most frontier families, the twice-yearly soap-making ordeal remained a necessary evil, producing enough harsh cleanser to last 6 months and creating memories that would last a lifetime. Now that you understand where soap comes from, let's talk about what happens when you actually try to get clean with it. Chapter 4, Monday Wash Day Marathon. Now that you've survived the chemical warfare of soap making, it's time to put that caustic brown substance to work. And congratulations, you've just awakened to the most dreaded day of the Frontier Week. It's Monday morning, and you're about to discover why frontier women aged faster than milk left in the sun. Welcome to Wash Day, an endurance test that makes Saturday night bathing look like a leisurely spa treatment. You think you understand hard work? You think you know what physical exhaustion feels like? Well, friend, you're about to get an education in what it means to wage war against dirt using nothing but muscle power, harsh soap, and a determination born of social necessity. Because in frontier society, clean clothes aren't just about comfort. They're about maintaining the thin veneer of civilization that separates you from complete barbarism. The assault begins before dawn. While normal people are still dreaming of better lives in places with actual plumbing, you're already hauling water. Lots of water. So much water that you'll question whether clean clothes are actually worth this much suffering. A proper wash day requires at least 50 gallons of water. That's roughly 400 pounds of liquid that needs to be carried bucket by bucket from whatever water source your family has access to. But wait, there's more. This isn't just about moving water from one place to another. Most of that water needs to be heated, which means you're also going to burn through 150 to 200 pounds of firewood. You'll need hot water for washing, boiling water for the heavily soiled items, warm water for rinsing, and cold water for the final rinse that's supposed to make everything feel fresh and clean. Your washing equipment looks like something designed by someone who hated the concept of human comfort. 4 wooden tubs of different sizes, each one positioned strategically around your outdoor washing area. A washboard that's essentially a piece of corrugated metal designed to scrape skin off knuckles while theoretically removing dirt from fabric. Long wooden sticks for stirring clothes in boiling water without burning yourself too badly, and copper or brass kettles for boiling. Iron is avoided because it leaves rust stains, adding insult to the injury of this entire process. The logistics would impress a military quartermaster. You spent Sunday evening sorting clothes, mending tiers, and mentally preparing for battle. Everything gets categorized. Whites that need boiling, colored items that can't handle extreme heat, heavily soiled work clothes that require industrial strength intervention, and delicate items that need gentle handling despite being washed with soap that could strip paint. Emily French, a hardworking woman in 1890s Denver, captured the brutal reality in her diary entries about struggling to maintain her home while working as a laundress for others. The physical demands were so intense that many frontier wives developed permanent disabilities, scarred hands from harsh lye soap, bent backs from constant lifting and bending, and respiratory problems from breathing steam and chemical fumes for hours at a time. The washing sequence follows protocols that were developed through generations of trial and error, usually involving a lot of error and ruined clothing. Whites go first when the water is cleanest and hottest. These get the full treatment, scrubbing on the washboard right side out, then flipping them inside out for another round of abuse, then into the boiling kettle for 30 minutes of chemical and thermal torture. Watching clothes boil is like witnessing a medieval punishment. You lift them out of the scalding water with wooden sticks. Using metal would burn your hands, and using your bare hands would be a form of self-mutilation. The clothes emerge steaming and dripping, ready for the next phase of their ordeal. Rinsing happens in multiple stages, each one requiring fresh water that you've already hauled and heated. First, rinse in warm water to remove the soap. Second, rinse in cooler water. And final, rinse in cold water that's been tinted blue with indigo. This bluing isn't just frontier fashion. It's an optical trick that makes yellowed whites appear whiter by counteracting the yellow tint with blue. Starching comes next, because frontier society demands that certain garments maintain their shape and stiffness as symbols of respectability. Flour mixed with water creates a starch solution that gets painted onto collars, shirt fronts, and petticoats. This isn't about comfort. Starch clothes are uncomfortable, hot, and restrictive. But they look proper, and looking proper is worth almost any amount of personal discomfort. Then comes the wringing. With no mechanical wringers available until the 1880s, every piece of clothing gets twisted and squeezed by hand until most of the water is removed. Your hands are already raw from the harsh soap and hot water, and now you're putting them through a torture device disguised as fabric. By the end of wash day, your hands look like you've been in a fight with a cheese grater, and the cheese grater won. Finally, if the weather gods are smiling, you get to hang everything on lines or spread it on bushes to dry. This sounds simple until you realize that a sudden rainstorm can undo an entire day's work in minutes. Clothes that took 8 hours to clean can be soaked and dirty again faster than you can run outside and collect them. When everything goes perfectly, when the weather cooperates, when nothing tears during the washing, when the fire doesn't go out and ruin a pot of boiling clothes, the entire process takes 3 full days. Monday for washing, Tuesday for ironing with heavy metal implements heated on the stove, and Wednesday for putting everything away and planning next week's assault on cleanliness. But perfection is rare on the frontier. Rain can extend the process for a week, with wet clothes draped throughout the house, creating humidity that encourages mold and mildew. Snow means washing indoors, filling your living space with steam, chemical fumes, and the constant drip of water from clothes that can't properly dry. The physical toll is extraordinary. Frontier women developed upper body strength that would impress modern athletes, simply from the constant lifting, stirring, and wringing required to keep their families' clothes clean. But this strength came at a cost: premature aging, chronic back problems, and hands permanently scarred by caustic soap and scalding water. And at the end of this 3-day ordeal, when the last shirt is ironed and the last sock is folded, you get to look forward to doing it all again next Monday. But if you think clean clothes are challenging, wait until you discover what frontier dental care really means. Chapter 5: Your Rotting Teeth and Blacksmith Dentistry. So you've survived Monday's laundry marathon, and you're feeling pretty accomplished about maintaining some semblance of cleanliness in this unforgiving frontier world. Your clothes are clean, your hands are only moderately scarred from the lye soap, and you're ready to tackle whatever challenges frontier life throws at you next. Time to smile about your achievements. Go ahead, flash those pearly whites, and wait. What's that taste in your mouth? That's not morning breath, friend. That's the beginning of your introduction to frontier dental care. And spoiler alert, there isn't any. Welcome to an era when tooth decay is as inevitable as sunrise, when dental pain is considered a normal part of human existence, and when the phrase grin and bear it takes on a whole new meaning because grinning might literally cause your teeth to fall out. Let's start with your daily oral hygiene routine, which can be summed up in one word: nothing. That toothbrush you've been using twice daily your entire modern life? It doesn't exist. The toothpaste that makes your mouth feel fresh and clean won't be invented until 1873, and even then it'll take decades to reach frontier communities. Dental floss? That's pure science fiction as far as frontier folks are concerned. Your mouth has become a biological experiment in what happens when bacteria meet sugar, acid, and complete neglect. Every meal leaves food particles lodged between your teeth, and your only tool for removal is the tip of your knife. The same knife you use for eating, whittling, cleaning your fingernails, and occasional self-defense. Imagine using a Bowie knife as dental equipment, and you'll understand why frontier folks developed a very casual relationship with oral precision. Some frontier families attempt dental care using methods that would make a modern dentist weep. Campfire ash rubbed on teeth was popular, despite being so abrasive it removed enamel along with whatever you were trying to clean. Salt or baking soda served as tooth powder when available, though these commodities were often too precious to waste on something as frivolous as dental hygiene when they could be used for food preservation or cooking. The Dodge City Times published a recipe in 1885 for tooth powder combining orris root, prepared chalk, powdered myrrh, and Castile soap, but finding these ingredients on the frontier was about as likely as finding a unicorn. Most people made do with chewing fibrous twigs to remove food particles, a practice that occasionally worked, but more often resulted in splinters embedded in already sensitive gums. After 6 months of frontier living, your teeth have begun their inevitable transformation from functional body parts to sources of constant misery. Cavities aren't just common, they're universal. Your gums are swollen and tender. Those aren't just food stains discoloring your teeth. That's actual decay, spreading like a slow-motion disaster across your mouth. And here's where frontier dental care gets truly medieval. When your teeth become problematic, there's exactly one solution: extraction. Not filling, not cleaning, not any of the gentle interventions you might imagine. Just removal of the offending tooth using whatever tools are handy and whoever has the strongest grip in town. Enter the blacksmith, your new dental professional. Now, you might wonder why the guy who shoes horses and fixes wagon wheels has become the go-to person for oral surgery. The answer is simple. He's got the tools and the upper body strength necessary to rip a stubborn tooth out of your skull. His pliers were designed for bending iron, but they work just fine for gripping molars. His arm strength was developed for swinging hammers, but it transfers nicely to the yanking and twisting required for tooth extraction. The fact that he knows absolutely nothing about oral anatomy, pain management, or sterile technique is considered irrelevant compared to his enthusiasm for the work and his willingness to charge reasonable rates. Your appointment with Dr. Blacksmith begins with him examining his tools. The same pliers he used yesterday to fix a bridle, wipe clean on his leather apron. Anesthesia consists of whatever whiskey you can afford to drink beforehand, though many patients pass out from pain before the alcohol has any chance to take effect. The extraction process would be at home in a medieval torture chamber. You're held down by whoever's available, usually a couple of sturdy volunteers who understand that your survival instincts are going to kick in hard when the pain starts. The blacksmith grips your tooth with his pliers, called dental pelicans or dental keys, and begins the process of wiggling, twisting, and yanking that passes for surgical technique. Sometimes he gets lucky and the tooth comes out cleanly. More often, it breaks apart, leaving roots embedded in your jawbone and requiring additional excavation with whatever sharp implements are handy. Neighboring teeth sometimes get damaged in the process, creating new problems that will require future visits to your friendly neighborhood blacksmith dentist. Post-extraction care consists of stuffing the bleeding socket with whatever clean cloth is available and hoping infection doesn't set in. There's no understanding of bacterial contamination, no antibiotics, no follow-up care. You stuff the hole with cloth, bite down hard, and pray that your body's natural healing processes are stronger than whatever bacteria are currently colonizing your mouth. Many frontier residents don't survive serious dental infections. An abscessed tooth can spread infection to your brain or heart, killing you within days of what started as a simple toothache. Emily French, the hardworking Denver woman whose diary chronicles frontier hardships, described herself as barely able to afford false teeth in the 1880s, suggesting that tooth loss was so common that replacement teeth were a normal part of frontier budgeting. Those false teeth, when available, were crude affairs carved from wood or bone that fit poorly and made eating a challenge. Many people simply learned to live without problematic teeth, adjusting their diets to soft foods they could gum rather than chew. Frontier cookbooks include entire sections devoted to foods suitable for the toothless, recognizing that dental disability was a normal part of aging in the pre-modern world. But perhaps the most horrifying aspect of frontier dental care is the shared toothbrush phenomenon in public establishments. Saloons and hotels that catered to travelers often provided communal toothbrushes, single implements used by dozens of customers, spreading diseases and infections throughout entire communities. These brushes, when they existed at all, were stiff-bristled horrors that were more likely to damage your gums than clean your teeth. The social pressure to maintain some semblance of oral hygiene meant that frontier folks developed creative alternatives to proper dental care. Some chewed tobacco specifically for its antiseptic properties, reasoning that the nicotine might kill whatever bacteria were destroying their teeth. Others gargled with whiskey or vinegar, creating their own mouthwash from whatever antiseptic liquids were available. And through all of this dental misery, you're expected to maintain a cheerful demeanor and social respectability. Bad breath was so universal that it wasn't even considered worth mentioning, but missing teeth could affect your social standing and marriage prospects. Now, if you think having rotting teeth is challenging, imagine dealing with all of this while wearing the multiple layers of restrictive clothing that frontier women were expected to endure. Chapter 6. If you're a woman, it gets worse. You thought dealing with rotting teeth and blacksmith dentistry was the height of frontier medical horror? Well, congratulations. You're about to discover that if you happen to be a woman on the frontier, all of those challenges are just the warm-up act for a lifetime of additional hygiene nightmares that would make a modern feminist burn her corset in protest. If you're a woman, everything we've discussed so far, the weekly family bath, the harsh lye soap, the dental decay, the general acceptance of filth as a way of life, gets multiplied by about 10 layers of social expectations, physical restrictions, and biological realities that turn basic cleanliness into an Olympic-level endurance sport. Let's start with your wardrobe, which isn't just clothing. It's a portable prison designed by someone who clearly hated the concept of female comfort, mobility, or hygiene. You wake up each morning and begin the elaborate process of transforming yourself from a human being into a Victorian ideal of femininity. First comes the chemise, a cotton or linen undergarment that's supposed to protect your skin from the horrors that come next. Then the corset. Yes, even frontier women wear corsets while doing manual labor that would challenge a professional athlete. This medieval torture device squeezes your ribs, restricts your breathing, and creates a lovely hourglass figure that comes at the cost of internal organ rearrangement. Next come the drawers, crotchless panelettes that provide modesty while ensuring that every trip to the outhouse becomes an adventure in fabric management. Multiple petticoats follow, creating layers upon layers of fabric that trap heat, moisture, and every odor your body produces throughout the day. Finally, the outer dress, which completes your transformation into a walking greenhouse where bacteria can flourish in dark, warm, humid conditions. This multi-layer system creates its own ecosystem of problems. Heat gets trapped between layers, creating perfect breeding grounds for fungi and bacteria. Sweat has nowhere to go, so it soaks into multiple layers of fabric that can't be easily washed. By the end of a typical frontier workday, you're essentially wearing a biological experiment that would fascinate scientists and horrify anyone with a functioning sense of smell. But wait, it gets worse. Because while you're struggling with this clothing nightmare, you're also expected to maintain the fiction that you're this civilizing influence on the frontier. Society expects you to be cleaner, more refined, and more morally pure than the men around you, despite facing identical challenges with the added burden of restrictive clothing and social expectations that would crush a lesser being. Now let's talk about something that polite society never discusses, but that affects every woman of childbearing age: menstrual management in an era before commercial products. You're dealing with monthly cycles using cloth rags fashioned from old clothing, creating diapers similar to those used for babies. These need to be folded carefully, positioned precisely, and held in place with hope, prayer, and the occasional safety pin if you're lucky enough to own one. These cloth rags require washing and reusing repeatedly, which means adding blood-stained fabric to your already overwhelming laundry routine. The washing process involves soaking, scrubbing with harsh lye soap, and hoping that boiling water removes both stains and bacteria. Privacy for this process is non-existent. You're washing menstrual cloths in the same tubs used for family laundry, trying to maintain discretion while dealing with a biological reality that half the population experiences monthly. The social taboo around menstruation means you can't discuss problems, seek advice, or even acknowledge that this monthly ordeal exists. You suffer through cramping, heavy bleeding, and the constant anxiety about leakage while maintaining the cheerful demeanor expected of frontier women. Any visible evidence of your monthly cycle is considered scandalous, so you perfect the art of walking, sitting, and working while constantly monitoring for accidents that could destroy your social reputation. Childbirth brings its own horrifying set of hygiene challenges. Prenatal care consists of hoping nothing goes wrong and praying that the local midwife knows more than you do about the process of bringing new life into the world. The midwife's understanding of sterile technique extends to wiping her hands on her apron before examining you. The same apron she's been wearing while helping other women, tending sick family members, and doing general frontier housework. Labor happens in whatever room can be spared, often the same space where the family eats, sleeps, and conducts daily business. Clean linens are a luxury that many families can't afford, so you give birth on whatever fabric is available, knowing it will need to be cleaned afterward if you both survive the experience. The birthing process involves multiple people with unwashed hands, unsterilized instruments, and no understanding that bacteria might be problematic for women in vulnerable conditions. Postpartum recovery is a cruel joke. You're expected to return to full household duties within days of giving birth, despite bleeding, exhaustion, and increased infection risks. There's no understanding of postpartum depression, no support for physical recovery, and definitely no concept that new mothers might need time to heal before resuming the backbreaking work of frontier life. The beauty standards of the era add another layer of complexity to your hygiene struggles. Pale skin is prized, so you avoid sun exposure that might provide vitamin D and fresh air. You use bleach-based cosmetics to lighten your complexion, often causing chemical burns in pursuit of the proper skin tone. But using any cosmetics is also considered evidence of moral corruption, leaving you in an impossible position between natural appearance and social expectations. Your hair becomes another battleground between cleanliness and social acceptability. The elaborate hairstyles expected of respectable women require time, tools, and products that are rarely available on the frontier. You're supposed to maintain complex braids, buns, and curls while working in conditions that would challenge a modern hairstylist with unlimited resources and climate-controlled environments. The psychological pressure is enormous. You're maintaining the home, caring for children, helping with farm work, and managing all of your own hygiene challenges while serving as the moral center of frontier civilization. Any failure to maintain proper standards reflects not just on you, but on your family's social standing and your husband's reputation as a provider. Female friendships become essential survival networks where women share practical advice about managing impossible hygiene expectations. These relationships provide the only safe space for discussing menstrual problems, childbirth fears, and the constant struggle to maintain cleanliness while working in conditions that make cleanliness nearly impossible. And through all of this, you're expected to smile, maintain a cheerful disposition, and never complain about conditions that would drive lesser mortals to madness. But if you think women's hygiene challenges are rough, wait until you see what passes for cleanliness in the mining camps, where men have given up any pretense of civilization. Chapter 7: Mining Camps and the Depths of Human Squalor. You thought frontier women had it rough, with their impossible hygiene expectations and restrictive clothing? Well, let me introduce you to the other end of the cleanliness spectrum, the mining camps, where men have collectively decided that civilization is optional and hygiene is for people who aren't busy digging fortunes out of the ground. Welcome to the absolute nadir of American frontier hygiene, where the concept of cleanliness has been abandoned so thoroughly that it's become a distant memory, like childhood dreams or the taste of fresh vegetables. Picture this. You've just arrived at a gold mining camp in the Sierra Nevada mountains, drawn by promises of easy wealth and adventure. What you find instead is a collection of crude log cabins that make your frontier homestead look like a luxury resort. These aren't family homes designed for comfort. These are survival shelters designed to house as many men as possible in the smallest space imaginable. Your new home is a single-room cabin measuring roughly 12 feet by 12 feet, and you're sharing it with 11 other men. 12 human beings, each one carrying months of accumulated grime, sweat, and the distinctive aroma of men who've given up any pretense of personal hygiene, all crammed into a space designed for maybe half that number. The sleeping arrangements would be hilarious if they weren't so horrifying. Mattresses, and we're using that term very generously, are stuffed with pine needles, straw, or whatever organic material was available when someone got around to making them. These haven't been changed, cleaned, or even shaken out since the camp was established, creating perfect breeding grounds for what the miners cheerfully call seam squirrels. Seam squirrels, in case you're wondering, are lice. Lots and lots of lice. They've colonized every piece of fabric in the cabin, from the mattresses to the blankets to the clothes hanging on wall pegs. These aren't just occasional visitors. They're permanent residents who've established thriving communities in the seams of your clothing, hence the nickname. They crawl, they bite, they multiply, and they've basically declared your body their personal territory. Bedbugs have also joined this parasitic paradise, turning sleep into a nightly battle against creatures that emerge from the mattress cracks as soon as you lie down. Many miners have given up on beds entirely, preferring to sleep on tables, floors, or even standing up rather than subject themselves to the insect assault that comes with horizontal rest. But let's talk about what really sets mining camp hygiene apart from regular frontier filth: the water situation. Remember how precious and limited clean water was in farming communities? Well, in mining areas, you're not just dealing with scarcity, you're dealing with active contamination that turns every water source into a chemistry experiment gone wrong. Upstream mining operations have introduced mercury, cyanide, and other toxic chemicals into what used to be pristine mountain streams. Hydraulic mining, the practice of blasting hillsides apart with high-pressure water cannons, has turned clear alpine creeks into muddy torrents carrying runoff that includes heavy metals, mining chemicals, and enough sediment to choke a horse. Your drinking water choices are contaminated stream water that might poison you slowly, or no water at all, which will definitely kill you quickly. Most miners choose the slow poisoning option and hope for the best, developing a philosophical approach to toxicity that would impress modern environmental scientists. Bathing? That's become a theoretical concept, like honest politicians or unicorns. Some mining camps have attempted to establish public bathhouses, but these often turn out to be more dangerous than helpful. Multiple men bathe in the same water without changing it between users, creating a community soup of human filth that spreads skin diseases, infections, and ailments that don't even have names yet. These bathhouse facilities are crude wooden structures with minimal privacy, no heating, and the kind of ventilation that makes winter bathing an endurance test that separates the truly desperate from the merely dirty. Most miners simply avoid them, reasoning that being consistently filthy is preferable to risking whatever diseases are cultivating in the communal bathwater. The laundry situation has driven some miners to solutions so extreme they border on the surreal. California Gold Rush miners discovered that it was actually cheaper to ship their dirty clothes to San Francisco or even Hong Kong for washing than to attempt the process themselves. $12 per dozen shirts, equivalent to several $100s today, seemed reasonable compared to the time, effort, and resources required for proper cleaning in camp conditions. This practice created a thriving international laundry industry, with Chinese immigrants in San Francisco establishing successful businesses that served the mining camps. Ships regularly departed California ports loaded with dirty mining clothes bound for Asian laundries, while return voyages brought back clean garments for miners who could afford this ultimate luxury service. Colorado mining camps face additional challenges that make hygiene even more impossible than in California. Working above 10,000 feet elevation makes breathing difficult even without the constant exposure to dust, chemical fumes, and particulate matter from mining operations. The thin air means that any physical exertion, like hauling water for washing, leaves you gasping for oxygen and questioning whether cleanliness is worth potential suffocation. High-altitude mining also means extreme weather conditions that turn basic hygiene into survival challenges. Winter temperatures can drop to life-threatening levels, making any activity involving water a potential death sentence. Miners often go entire winters without removing their clothes, creating human-shaped biological experiments that would fascinate scientists and terrify anyone with a functioning nose. Respiratory illness is endemic in these camps, exacerbated by sleeping in unventilated cabins heated by wood stoves that fill the air with smoke and carbon monoxide. Add the constant inhalation of mining dust, chemical vapors, and the general atmospheric pollution of cramped living conditions, and you've created a perfect storm of health problems that make hygiene seem like a luxury concern. The psychological effects of this extreme squalor are almost as challenging as the physical ones. Men who arrived at mining camps with middle-class backgrounds and conventional hygiene standards gradually adapt to conditions that would have horrified their former selves. They develop new definitions of acceptable cleanliness that would shock their families back home. Some miners attempt to maintain minimal hygiene standards through creative solutions that reveal both human ingenuity and desperation. Snow becomes a substitute for soap and water, providing at least the sensation of cleanliness even if it doesn't address the fundamental problems. Others develop elaborate systems for washing one body part at a time, cycling through a minimal cleaning routine that addresses the most socially problematic areas while ignoring the rest. The social dynamics of mining camp hygiene create their own hierarchies and rituals. Successful miners who strike it rich often celebrate by spending enormous sums on luxury bathing experiences in distant cities, while those still searching for their fortune develop camaraderie around shared filth and mutual suffering. But even mining camp squalor pales in comparison to the wisdom that Native Americans could have shared if only the European settlers had been humble enough to listen. Chapter 8. What the Savages Could Teach You. So there you are, fresh from witnessing the absolute depths of mining camp squalor, probably thinking that frontier hygiene has reached its lowest possible point. Surely, you reason, this level of filth represents the baseline of human cleanliness on the American frontier. Well, prepare to have your assumptions turned completely upside down, because you're about to meet people who will make you question everything you thought you knew about staying clean in the wilderness. Meet your Native American neighbors who have been watching European settlers stumble around the frontier for decades, probably wondering how a people advanced enough to build ships and firearms could be so spectacularly ignorant about the basic principles of personal hygiene. You see, while you've been struggling with weekly baths, harsh lye soap, and the revolutionary concept that maybe washing your face every few days might be beneficial, the indigenous peoples of North America have been practicing sophisticated hygiene routines that would put your frontier cleanliness to shame. They've developed systems so advanced that it'll take European-descended Americans another century to catch up. Let's start with the most fundamental difference: frequency. While your frontier family considers once a week bathing the height of civilized behavior, Native American tribes have been practicing daily bathing for centuries. Not weekly, not monthly, daily, as in every single day, regardless of weather, season, or whether they feel like it. The Cherokee and other southeastern tribes practice something called going to water ceremonies that combine religious observance with thorough cleaning. This isn't just splashing around in a creek when they happen to feel dirty. This is a structured, ritualized approach to cleanliness that treats bathing as both a physical and spiritual necessity. Creek, Cherokee, and other tribes bathe multiple times daily when water is available, viewing cleanliness as essential to spiritual purity. While you're debating whether it's worth the effort to heat water for a Saturday night bath, they're incorporating washing into their daily routine, like eating or breathing. And here's the truly revolutionary part. They have separate bathing areas and times for men and women, ensuring privacy and modesty while maintaining their commitment to regular cleaning. They've solved the social and logistical problems of frequent bathing that your frontier community struggles with constantly. But wait, it gets better. Remember those crude wooden tubs that your family fights over every Saturday night? Native Americans have developed technology that makes your bathing arrangements look like something designed by someone who actively hated human comfort. Enter the sweat lodge, a hygiene innovation so advanced that European settlers initially dismissed it as primitive superstition, probably because they couldn't understand how something that didn't involve suffering could actually be beneficial. These structures use heated stones and water to create intense heat and humidity that opens pores, promotes sweating, and cleanses the body more thoroughly than any European bathing method you've experienced. The process eliminates toxins through sweating, provides deep cleaning that soap and water can't match, and includes social and spiritual elements that promote mental health and community bonding. While you're struggling to get clean in lukewarm water with skin-burning lye soap, they're using sophisticated temperature and humidity control to achieve cleanliness levels that European bathing methods simply can't reach. It's like comparing a horse-drawn cart to a steam engine. Both will get you where you're going, but one represents a fundamental leap in technological sophistication. And let's talk about their cleaning products, which make your harsh lye soap look like a medieval torture device masquerading as hygiene equipment. Native American women discovered centuries ago that yucca plants provide superior soap weed that's gentle on skin and hair while providing effective cleaning power. Frank Clifford's description of having his hair washed with soap weed root many times reveals that cowboys who learned this technique considered themselves incredibly fortunate. The yucca-based cleanser left hair soft and clean and lustrous, adjectives that no frontier settler has ever used to describe the results of lye soap. Bear grease mixed with herbs creates moisturizers and insect repellents that serve multiple hygiene purposes simultaneously. Various plant oils provide hair care and skin protection that maintain health while promoting cleanliness. These natural products are not only superior to European frontier soap, they're actually beneficial to the skin and hair, rather than damaging them in the process of removing dirt. The oral hygiene practices of Native Americans would revolutionize frontier dental care if European settlers weren't too proud to learn from savage methods. Traditional diets include fibrous foods that naturally clean teeth while eating. Specific plants are used for dental care, with twigs from certain trees serving as natural toothbrushes selected for their antibacterial properties. Dental decay is relatively rare among Native Americans following traditional diets and hygiene practices, which stands in stark contrast to the universal tooth rot that European settlers accept as normal. While you're planning your next visit to the blacksmith for tooth extraction, they're maintaining healthy teeth through preventive care that actually works. But here's the truly embarrassing part of this cultural comparison. European settlers are frequently described by Native Americans as malodorous and unclean. The European practice of rarely bathing, combined with heavy wool clothing that traps odors, creates a distinctive smell that Native Americans find genuinely offensive. You think you're representing the height of civilization, but from their perspective, you're walking biological hazards who apparently don't understand basic principles of human hygiene. Many intercultural conflicts are exacerbated by mutual disgust over hygiene practices that each group considers evidence of the other's fundamental barbarism. The cultural arrogance that prevents most European settlers from adopting obviously superior Native American practices represents one of the greatest missed opportunities in frontier history. Here you have indigenous peoples who have solved every major hygiene challenge that European settlers struggle with daily. Frequent bathing, effective natural cleansers, preventive dental care, sophisticated temperature control for cleaning. And the response is to dismiss these innovations as primitive. Gradually, some European settlers do begin adopting Native American practices, particularly those living in close contact with tribal communities. Mexican women, who incorporated indigenous knowledge into their practices, become bridges between cultures, sharing techniques that often prove superior to European methods. Cowboys like Frank Clifford learned to appreciate soapweed and other native cleansing methods, though many European settlers remain resistant to savage practices even when their own methods are clearly inferior. The stubborn refusal to learn from people who have mastered frontier living represents European cultural prejudice at its most self-defeating. Smart frontier families who overcome their cultural biases and learn from Native American hygiene wisdom find themselves cleaner, healthier, and more comfortable than their neighbors who cling to European methods that weren't designed for frontier conditions. But most settlers continue struggling with inferior techniques, while superior solutions exist right in front of them, demonstrated daily by people they're too prejudiced to learn from. Now, if you can drag yourself away from contemplating this missed educational opportunity, let's examine how commercial establishments created their own twisted hierarchies around frontier cleanliness. Chapter 9: Saloons, Hotels, and Paying for Clean Water. So you've just witnessed the tragic irony of European settlers ignoring superior Native American hygiene wisdom while struggling with their own inferior methods. You're probably feeling pretty enlightened about the missed opportunities for better cleanliness on the frontier. Well, get ready to witness how commercial establishments took these already problematic hygiene standards and turned them into a capitalist enterprise that would make a modern health inspector weep into his clipboard. Welcome to the wonderful world of frontier commerce, where cleanliness isn't just next to godliness. It's next to your wallet, and the deeper your pockets, the cleaner you get to be. Let's start with the crown jewel of frontier social life, the saloon. You push through those iconic swinging doors, expecting to find a romanticized watering hole of Hollywood westerns, and instead discover a biological research laboratory disguised as a drinking establishment. The first thing that hits you isn't the atmosphere or the piano music, it's the smell. Imagine a combination of spilled alcohol, tobacco juice, unwashed human bodies, and something else that defies classification but suggests organic decay. This aromatic symphony has been building for months, maybe years, soaking into the wooden floors, the bar, and every piece of fabric in the building. See that towel hanging behind the bar? That grimy, stiff piece of fabric that used to be white but has achieved a color that doesn't exist in nature? That's the communal face towel, and it's about to become your new best friend, whether you like it or not. Every customer uses this towel to wipe beer foam from their mustache and beard. The same towel, all day, every day, until it's so saturated with accumulated human residue that it could probably stand up and walk around by itself. When you wipe your face with it, you're not sure if you're getting cleaner or just redistributing the facial contributions of the previous 50 customers in more artistic patterns. The bartender changes this towel approximately never, or at least not until it reaches a level of filthiness that begins affecting business. We're talking about fabrics so contaminated that it spreads skin diseases throughout the male population like a textile plague, creating a community-wide public health crisis that nobody recognizes because everybody's too drunk to notice the connection between shared towels and shared rashes. Spittoons the floor like bronze islands in a sea of tobacco-stained wood, theoretically providing target practice for the chewing tobacco enthusiasts who frequent these establishments. The key word here is theoretically, because accuracy is apparently optional when you're 3 whiskeys into your evening. The floors are sticky with brown stains that create a distinctive squelching sound when you walk, and you really don't want to examine too closely what you're stepping in. But saloons are luxury accommodations compared to the hierarchy of horror that awaits you in frontier hotels and boarding houses, where your cleanliness level is directly proportional to the contents of your wallet. At the top of this hygiene pyramid are the luxury establishments in cities like San Francisco or Denver, where the wealthy can purchase something approaching actual cleanliness. These places provide individual wash basins in each room, fresh towels that have seen soap within living memory, and chamber pots that get emptied by someone other than you. For an additional fee, because everything costs extra when you're buying civilization, you can even access heated bath water. But step down the economic ladder to working-class accommodations, and you'll discover creative new definitions of the word amenities. These establishments might provide 1 wash basin per floor, shared among a dozen or more guests. The towels get changed weekly if you're lucky, monthly if you're realistic, and seasonally if you're honest about frontier hospitality standards. Chamber pots are provided, but they're emptied irregularly according to schedules that seem to follow lunar cycles rather than human necessity. The results create aromatic experiences that would challenge the olfactory endurance of people who work in sewage treatment, except sewage treatment hasn't been invented yet. And then there's the pricing structure that reveals the true economic stratification of frontier cleanliness. When you finally decide that desperation has overcome your financial caution and you're ready to pay for a real bath, you discover that cleanliness operates on a tiered system that would make airline executives proud. First water, clean, hot water that hasn't been contaminated by previous bathers, costs 50 cents, which is equivalent to about $15 in modern money. This is premium bathing, the Rolls-Royce of frontier hygiene, available only to those who can afford to pay luxury prices for basic human dignity. Used water, the same water that someone else has already bathed in, costs 25 cents. You're essentially buying someone else's bath remnants, getting clean in water that's already been flavored by another person's accumulated grime. It's like buying a used car, except the car is water and the previous owner left all their dirt in it. Soap and towel cost an additional 20 cents because apparently the luxury of cleaning agents and drying materials requires separate charges. Many cost-conscious customers skip this fee entirely, bringing their own supplies or simply doing without, because 20 cents might represent their food budget for the day. This pricing system creates a clear hierarchy where wealthy customers enjoy clean, hot water, while working men clean themselves in increasingly murky liquid that's been pre-owned by multiple previous bathers. By the time the cheapest customers get their turn, they're essentially bathing in human soup that may or may not qualify as water anymore. Barbershops serve as the primary hygiene establishments in frontier towns, offering services that extend far beyond hair cutting into the realm of comprehensive personal maintenance. Your local barber provides baths, tooth extraction, minor surgery, bloodletting, and social gathering space where men can exchange news and gossip while waiting for their turn at civilization. A quality barber is essential to a town's development, and successful practitioners can command fees that reflect their importance to community life. These establishments become social centers where hygiene meets commerce meets entertainment, creating a unique frontier institution that serves multiple community needs simultaneously. The bathhouse industry that develops in larger towns creates sophisticated pricing structures that make cleanliness a luxury commodity. San Francisco bathhouses during the gold rush charge premium prices for privacy, heated water, and clean towels, with some establishments offering additional luxury services, including perfumed water, imported soaps, and private dressing rooms. The contrast between these establishments and the crude shared facilities available to working men reinforces social divisions that persist throughout the frontier period, creating a two-tiered system where cleanliness becomes a marker of social status rather than a basic human need. But even the fanciest commercial bathing pales in comparison to the daily reality most frontier folks face when nature calls. Chapter 10: Your Daily Appointment with the Outhouse. So you've just discovered the economic hierarchy of frontier bathing, where cleanliness can be purchased in tiers ranging from luxurious to barely tolerable. You're feeling pretty sophisticated about understanding the commercial aspects of frontier hygiene, maybe even thinking you've grasped the full scope of sanitation challenges in the Wild West. Well, friend, it's time to discuss the most democratic institution on the frontier, the one place where rich and poor, clean and dirty, civilized and barbaric all face exactly the same humbling experience. Welcome to your daily appointment with the outhouse, where human dignity goes to die and everyone gets reminded that some aspects of frontier life are just universally awful. Picture this. You've just finished your morning coffee, if you're lucky enough to have coffee, and nature is making one of those announcements that can't be ignored, postponed, or negotiated with. In a modern world, you'd simply walk a few steps to a private, climate-controlled room with running water, soft tissue, and reading material. On the frontier, you're about to embark on an adventure that combines architecture, meteorology, wildlife management, and personal courage in ways you never imagined possible. Your destination is a wooden structure that represents both human ingenuity and the complete abandonment of comfort as a design principle. The standard frontier outhouse measures roughly 3 feet by 3 feet for a single-holer, or 3 feet by 6 feet if your family has invested in the luxury 2-holer model that allows for simultaneous occupancy, because nothing says family bonding like shared elimination experiences. This architectural marvel has been constructed over a pit that's 5 to 6 feet deep, which seems reasonable until you realize that this pit is going to fill up with the contributions of your entire family for the next several months. When it reaches within 2 feet of the surface, the whole structure gets moved to a new location, and the old pit gets covered with dirt and hopefully marked somehow so future excavation projects don't result in unpleasant archaeological discoveries. The sensory experience of approaching the outhouse begins long before you actually reach it. Summer heat turns these structures into aromatic ovens that broadcast their contents across impressive distances. You'll know you're getting close because the smell hits you like a physical force that makes you question whether your bodily needs are really urgent enough to justify what you're about to endure. Winter brings different challenges because now you're dealing with a wooden refrigerator that happens to contain frozen human waste. The cold doesn't eliminate the odor. It just changes its character from overwhelmingly putrid to sharply caustic. Plus, you get the added adventure of sitting on wood that's cold enough to freeze skin on contact, turning a simple biological function into an endurance test that would challenge Arctic explorers. But the temperature is just the beginning of your outhouse trials. These structures are perfect habitats for wildlife that you really don't want to encounter when you're in a vulnerable position. Black widow spiders find the dark, rarely cleaned spaces ideal for establishing homes, and they're not particularly interested in sharing their territory with human visitors. Every trip becomes a careful inspection for eight-legged residents who might object to your intrusion. Flies breed in these conditions with enthusiasm that would impress entomologists, creating vast swarms that treat the outhouse as their personal nursery and your visit as an all-you-can-eat buffet opportunity. They're not just annoying. They're actively spreading disease throughout the community by moving directly from waste to food to human contact surfaces without any concept of hygiene protocols. The structural integrity of these buildings ranges from questionable to actively dangerous, depending on how much effort your family invested in construction and maintenance. Many outhouses are built by people whose carpentry skills are limited to good enough to not fall down immediately, resulting in structures that sway in the wind, leak during rain, and occasionally collapse with occupants still inside. The seating arrangements represent frontier pragmatism at its most basic level. You're looking at a wooden board with a hole cut in it, positioned over the pit below. The wood is rough, unfinished, and likely to give you splinters in areas where splinters are particularly unwelcome. There's no cushioning, no ergonomic design, and definitely no consideration for human comfort beyond the basic requirement of providing a place to sit. Now, let's discuss toilet paper, or rather, the complete absence of anything resembling modern bathroom tissue. This necessity simply doesn't exist on the frontier, forcing you to develop creative solutions that range from practical to painful. Corn cobs are the gold standard of frontier toilet paper alternatives. They're free, readily available, naturally biodegradable, and actually somewhat effective for their intended purpose. Experienced outhouse users develop preferences for different types of corn. Some swear by sweet corn cobs for their softer texture, while others prefer field corn for its durability. The really sophisticated folks save the red cobs, which are considered the Cadillac of corn-based personal hygiene products. The Sears and Roebuck catalog, when available, provides softer pages that are particularly prized for bathroom duty. Families often hang old catalogs in the outhouse specifically for this purpose, though there's always debate about whether to use the lingerie pages or save them for more recreational reading. Newspapers serve similar duty when catalogs aren't available, though the ink tends to come off on sensitive skin in ways that create temporary tattoos you never wanted. Leaves work in warmer months, but you need to be careful about your botanical selections. Poison ivy makes a poor toilet paper substitute, as many frontier families learned through painful experience. Smooth stones get pressed into service when organic options aren't available, though this requires a level of desperation that most people prefer not to contemplate. Public facilities in frontier towns attempt to accommodate large numbers of users through multi-seat outhouses built over deeper vaults that can extend 12 to 15 feet underground. These communal facilities are breeding grounds for disease transmission and social awkwardness, as privacy becomes impossible when multiple people are conducting their business in close proximity. The psychological impact of frontier waste management affects daily life in ways that modern Americans can barely comprehend. The constant presence of human waste odors, the anxiety about disease transmission, and the complete lack of privacy creates stress that contributes to mental health problems throughout frontier communities. Every trip to the outhouse becomes a meditation on human vulnerability, natural necessity, and the thin line between civilization and chaos. You're reminded daily that no matter how successful you become, how much money you accumulate, or how refined your manners, you still need to make regular pilgrimages to a wooden box positioned over a hole in the ground. But if you think outhouses represent the low point of frontier sanitation, wait until you discover what happens when poor hygiene meets the disease environment of the 1870s. Chapter 11: Disease, Death, and the Price of Filth. So there you are, having just survived another harrowing trip to the outhouse, probably thinking that the worst part of frontier sanitation is the daily humiliation of conducting your business in a wooden box over a pit. You've endured the splinters, the spiders, the corn cob toilet paper, and a complete absence of privacy, and you're feeling pretty resilient about your ability to handle frontier life's indignities. Well, congratulations on your optimism, because you're about to discover that all those sanitation challenges you've been dealing with aren't just inconvenient. They're actively trying to kill you. And not in a quick, honorable way like a gunfight or a cattle stampede, but slowly, miserably, and in ways that will make you question every life choice that brought you to this godforsaken frontier. Welcome to the deadly reality of what happens when poor hygiene meets 19th century disease, where your daily struggles with cleanliness aren't just about social acceptability. They're literally matters of life and death. Let's start with the big one: cholera, a disease so terrifying that entire communities would evacuate at the first rumor of its approach. The 1849 cholera epidemic swept through the frontier like wildfire, killing over 3,000 people in the Mississippi Valley alone. This wasn't just a statistic, this was your neighbors, your family members, your friends dying within days of showing the first symptoms. Here's the truly horrifying part. Cholera spreads through contaminated water sources, which means every sip you take from that questionable well or muddy stream is potentially your last. The disease doesn't care about your social status, your moral character, or how hard you've worked to build a life on the frontier. It only cares about whether you've consumed water that's been contaminated by human waste. And given the sanitation standards we've been discussing, that's pretty much every water source within 100 miles. The symptoms start innocently enough: some stomach cramping, maybe a bit of diarrhea that you attribute to bad food or too much whiskey. Then it escalates into a nightmare of violent purging from both ends of your digestive system. Dehydration so severe that your skin shrivels, and death within 24 to 48 hours if you're unlucky. Watching someone die of cholera is like watching them dissolve from the inside out, and there's absolutely nothing frontier medicine can do to help them. But cholera is just the headline act in this medical horror show. Meet dysentery, the everyday killer that's so common it's earned regional nicknames like Tennessee Trot and Virginia Quickstep, because apparently frontier folks developed a sense of humor about the diseases that were systematically murdering them. Dysentery is what happens when bacterial contamination of food and water meets your digestive system and decides to have a party at your expense. Unlike cholera's dramatic finale, dysentery is a more leisurely killer that gives you time to contemplate your mortality while experiencing abdominal pain that would make a cavalry charge seem pleasant by comparison. Wagon trains and cattle drives are particularly vulnerable because they're mobile communities that can't establish proper sanitation systems. When one person develops dysentery, it spreads through the group like gossip, except instead of embarrassing stories, it's sharing bacteria that cause bloody diarrhea and fever. By the time you realize you have a dysentery outbreak, half your travel companions are too sick to work, and the other half are wondering if they should dig graves or keep moving and hope for the best. Now let's talk about your constant companions: lice, fleas, and the various other parasites that have decided your body represents prime real estate in their arthropod housing market. These aren't just annoying, they're disease vectors that turn your personal hygiene failures into community health crises. Lice, affectionately known as seam squirrels for their habit of hiding in clothing seams, spread typhus and other diseases while causing constant itching that prevents sleep and contributes to psychological breakdown. Delousing treatments using coal oil are dangerous remedies that sometimes cause chemical burns or poisoning, but the alternative, living with thousands of blood-sucking parasites, is often worse than the cure. The constant scratching creates open wounds that become infected in an era before antibiotics or proper wound care. What starts as an annoying itch becomes an infected sore, which becomes a spreading infection, which becomes sepsis, which becomes death. You can literally scratch yourself to death on the frontier, and it happens more often than anyone wants to admit. But here's something that will really terrify you. Dental infections are killing frontier residents at an alarming rate, and there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it. Remember that blacksmith dentistry we discussed? Well, when tooth extraction goes wrong, and it often does, the resulting infection can spread to your brain or heart, killing you within days. An abscessed tooth, which would be easily treatable with modern antibiotics and proper dental care, becomes a death sentence on the frontier. The infection spreads through your bloodstream, causing fevers, delirium, and eventually organ failure. Many frontier graveyards contain headstones marking death from dental problems that a modern dentist could fix with a simple root canal and some penicillin. Women face additional health risks that make frontier life even more dangerous for the female half of the population. Puerperal fever, also known as childbed fever, kills thousands of new mothers due to bacterial infections introduced during delivery by midwives and doctors who don't understand that dirty hands might be problematic for women in vulnerable conditions. The childbirth process involves multiple people with unwashed hands, unsterilized instruments, and no understanding that bacteria exist, much less that they might cause problems. Women give birth in whatever room can be spared, often the same space where the family conducts daily business, ensuring maximum exposure to whatever pathogens are circulating through the household. Postpartum recovery is a cruel joke that increases infection risks while demanding immediate return to physically demanding work. There's no understanding of postpartum complications, no support for physical recovery, and definitely no concept that new mothers might need time to heal before resuming the backbreaking work of frontier life. Respiratory diseases flourish in frontier communities where people live in poorly ventilated spaces heated by wood stoves that fill the air with smoke and carbon monoxide. Tuberculosis spreads rapidly through crowded mining camps and boarding houses where multiple people share sleeping spaces and contaminated air. The combination of malnutrition, exposure to harsh weather, and poor hygiene creates conditions that allow disease to flourish like bacteria in a petri dish. Your immune system, already compromised by the constant stress of frontier life, simply can't keep up with the bacterial assault that poor sanitation enables. Winter brings its own set of health challenges as families seal themselves into poorly ventilated cabins where diseases spread like wildfire through populations that are already weakened by cold, poor nutrition, and the psychological stress of survival. But perhaps most tragically, many of these deaths are preventable with basic sanitation knowledge that won't become widespread for another generation. Chapter 12: Winter Survival and Frozen Misery. So you've just learned how poor frontier hygiene can literally kill you through disease, infection, and various bacterial nightmares that turn everyday activities into potential death sentences. You're probably thinking that surely winter, with its clean snow, crisp air, and the natural refrigeration that slows bacterial growth, might provide some relief from this ongoing biological warfare. Oh, you sweet, optimistic soul. You're about to discover that winter doesn't solve frontier hygiene problems. It flash freezes them into a crystalline hell that makes summer's heat, dust, and disease look like a tropical vacation by comparison. Welcome to the ultimate test of frontier hygiene ingenuity, where survival trumps cleanliness so completely that the very concept of staying clean becomes as fantastical as unicorns or politicians keeping their promises. It's late October, and you can feel winter approaching like a slow-motion avalanche of misery. The first hard frost has killed your vegetable garden. The trees are dropping their leaves like they're abandoning ship, and there's a bite in the air that suggests nature is about to spend the next 4 months trying to kill you through hypothermia. Time to make some hard choices about hygiene versus survival. Your family gathers for what amounts to a war council, because that's essentially what winter preparation is: planning a military campaign against an enemy that wants to freeze you, starve you, and generally make you question every decision that led to living in a place where water turns to stone for half the year. The first casualty of winter survival is the concept of changeable clothing. Remember that elaborate laundry routine we discussed? The one that required 50 gallons of water, 200 pounds of firewood, and 3 days of backbreaking labor? Well, forget about it for the next 4 to 6 months, because winter has just made proper laundering impossible. Your family's autumn preparation includes stockpiling soap, firewood, and clean clothing that will need to last until spring. But here's where frontier pragmatism reaches its illogical extreme. Many families, particularly children, are literally sewn into their winter clothing in November and won't be freed from their fabric prisons until warm weather returns in March or April. Picture this. Little Johnny gets dressed in his winter underwear, wool shirt, heavy pants, and whatever outer layers the family can afford, and then the openings get stitched shut. The sleeves get sewn to the body, the pants get sewn to the shirt, and the whole ensemble becomes a permanent second skin that will protect him from the cold, while slowly transforming into a biological hazard that would fascinate scientists and horrify anyone with a functioning nose. This isn't just laziness or poor planning. It's a survival strategy based on harsh frontier mathematics. Opening winter clothing lets cold air in, which can mean the difference between life and death when temperatures drop below survivable levels. Heat loss through clothing gaps kills people faster than the gradual accumulation of filth, so families choose the slow decline of hygiene over the quick death of hypothermia. By January, these sewn-in garments have achieved a level of integration with their wearers that borders on the biological. The clothing has absorbed months of sweat, skin oils, and various bodily functions, creating personalized bacterial ecosystems that are probably developing their own weather patterns. The fabric has become stiff with accumulated human residue and the smell. Well, let's just say that when spring finally arrives and these garments are cut away, the liberation celebration is tempered by the olfactory assault of revealing what's been festering underneath. But the clothing situation is just the beginning of winter's assault on frontier hygiene. Let's talk about water, that precious commodity that becomes even more precious when it freezes solid every night and stays frozen most of the day. Remember that morning routine of splashing your face with cold water from the basin? Well, now that basin is a solid block of ice that would require a pickaxe to access, and even if you manage to chip some ice off, you need to melt it over a fire that consumes precious fuel just to get enough liquid for basic washing. The mathematics of winter water usage become brutal very quickly. Every drop of water for washing has to be melted from ice or snow, which requires burning firewood that you might need for heating, cooking, or not freezing to death. When fuel is literally a matter of survival, using it for anything as frivolous as personal hygiene becomes a luxury that most families simply can't afford. Chamber pots, those ceramic vessels that provide nighttime alternatives to deadly trips to frozen outhouses, create their own special winter horrors. In sub-zero temperatures, the contents freeze overnight, creating aromatic ice sculptures that need to be thawed before they can be emptied. Imagine starting your morning by discovering that your thunder mug has become a frozen monument to last night's biological necessities. The outdoor privies become Arctic torture chambers where sitting on frozen wood can literally freeze skin to the seat, creating situations where people become temporarily stuck to their toilet facilities. The smart ones learn to bring blankets or heated stones to prevent their rear ends from adhering to frozen toilet seats. But this level of preparation requires forethought that isn't always available when nature makes urgent demands. Social activities grind to a halt, not just because of weather, but because gatherings of people who haven't properly bathed in months create atmospheric conditions that would challenge even the most forgiving social sensibilities. Winter weddings are rare partly because proper grooming is nearly impossible during the coldest months. It's hard to feel romantic about someone when you can smell them from across a poorly ventilated cabin. The psychological effects of winter hygiene deprivation compound the physical challenges. Seasonal depression gets worse when you can't even achieve basic cleanliness. The isolation of winter survival combines with the gradual degradation of personal hygiene to create mental health challenges that won't be understood or addressed for generations. Families develop hierarchies around the limited warm water that's available, creating systems where the most vulnerable members, children and elderly, get priority for whatever minimal washing can be managed. But even these efforts are token gestures that barely address the accumulating filth of months without proper bathing. Some frontier families attempt to maintain minimal hygiene standards by using snow as a soap substitute, rubbing it on exposed skin for the illusion of cleanliness, even though it doesn't address the fundamental problems of months without proper washing. Others heat small amounts of water for washing one body part at a time, rotating through a minimal cleaning routine that addresses the most socially problematic areas while ignoring everything else. By February, when winter's grip is strongest and spring feels like a mythological concept, entire communities have essentially given up on cleanliness as anything more than a distant memory. People stop noticing their own odors because everyone smells equally bad, creating a temporary society where hygiene standards have been collectively suspended in favor of simple survival. And then, miraculously, impossibly, spring begins to show its face, and suddenly the concept of cleanliness transforms from impossible luxury to urgent necessity. Chapter 13, The Slow Dawn of Hygiene Hope. And then it happens. After months of frozen misery, sewn-in clothing, and the gradual surrender of human dignity to winter survival, you hear it, the sound of ice cracking, water dripping from the roof, and birds returning from wherever sensible creatures go to escape frontier winters. Spring is finally, miraculously arriving, and with it comes something you'd almost forgotten existed: hope. Not just hope for warmer weather or the end of frozen chamber pots, but hope for the radical concept that maybe, just maybe, human beings don't have to live like biological disasters for the rest of their natural lives. You're about to witness the slow, halting, sometimes backward progress toward what will eventually become modern American hygiene standards. It's not going to be pretty, it's not going to be fast, and it's definitely not going to be linear, but change is coming to the frontier whether folks are ready for it or not. The first harbinger of this hygiene revolution comes from an unexpected source: war veterans returning from the Civil War with revolutionary ideas about cleanliness that they picked up from an organization called the U.S. Sanitary Commission. These men have seen something remarkable. They've witnessed firsthand how simply washing patients, their clothes, and the walls of their rooms, disease could be decreased dramatically. This isn't folklore or superstition. This is documented, observed, life-saving science that proved cleanliness could literally mean the difference between life and death. Veterans returned to frontier communities carrying stories about hospitals where washing actually saved lives, not just social reputations. Suddenly, the frontier has living proof that hygiene isn't just about smelling better or looking respectable. It's about survival. These veterans become unlikely evangelists for cleanliness, spreading the gospel of soap and water with the fervor of people who've seen miracles happen when human beings discover the radical concept of washing their hands. The post-war motto, "Cleanliness is next to godliness," isn't just catchy marketing. It's a revolutionary idea that appeals to American Puritan traditions while promoting practical health measures that actually work. For the first time, cleanliness becomes associated with moral virtue and patriotic duty, giving frontier families religious and cultural reasons to embrace better hygiene practices. Commercial soap production explodes after the war, making manufactured cleansers available in frontier towns at prices that working families can actually afford. No more twice-yearly soap-making ordeals that produce caustic brown bars that burn skin while theoretically removing dirt. Now you can buy actual soap that cleans without requiring medical treatment afterward. Colgate's invention of toothpaste in 1873 marks the beginning of modern oral hygiene. Though adoption is slow in remote areas where the concept of specialized dental cleaning products seems as exotic as French cuisine. Still, the word spreads. There are substances specifically designed to clean teeth without requiring visits to blacksmith dentists armed with pliers and questionable techniques. The first mass-produced deodorant appears in 1888, followed by additional antiperspirant products that begin addressing body odor as a social problem rather than a natural phenomenon. Suddenly, the idea that humans might not have to smell like livestock becomes commercially viable, creating entire industries devoted to the radical concept that people might want to control their personal aromatics. Infrastructure development accelerates hygiene improvements throughout the 1880s and 1890s in ways that transform daily life for frontier communities. Wells and iron hand pumps become common in established towns, providing cleaner water sources that reduce disease transmission without requiring daily expeditions to questionable streams or rivers. Indoor plumbing remains rare until the turn of the century, but public bathhouses and improved waste management systems make cleanliness more accessible to working-class populations. For the first time, regular bathing becomes economically feasible for people who aren't wealthy enough to employ servants for water hauling and fire maintenance. But perhaps the most important change agent arrives in the form of women. Not just any women, organized, educated, determined women who take one look at frontier hygiene standards and decide that civilization needs some serious intervention. The arrival of women in frontier communities consistently improves hygiene standards through both direct action and social pressure that makes ignoring cleanliness socially uncomfortable. These women organize cleanup campaigns that transform entire communities, establish schools that teach hygiene to children, and create social expectations around cleanliness that encourage men to improve their personal habits. Female-operated boarding houses set standards for domestic cleanliness that influence community-wide practices. These women understand that reputation for cleanliness attracts steady customers willing to pay premium rates, creating economic incentives for maintaining hygiene standards that gradually spread throughout frontier communities. Women's organizations sponsor public health initiatives that address water quality, waste management, and disease prevention through improved sanitation practices. They're not just suggesting that people should be cleaner. They're creating systems and infrastructure that make cleanliness actually achievable for ordinary families. Germ theory gains widespread acceptance in medical communities during the 1870s and 1880s, providing scientific justification for hygiene practices that had previously been based on tradition, social convention, or religious belief. Suddenly, there's actual science backing up the idea that washing prevents disease, giving educated frontier residents concrete reasons to embrace better sanitation practices. This new understanding leads to public health initiatives that revolutionize frontier community planning. Towns begin requiring proper waste disposal systems, regulating water sources, and establishing health codes that make basic sanitation legally mandatory rather than socially optional. Railroad expansion brings manufactured hygiene products to remote communities at affordable prices, making soap, tooth powder, and other cleaning supplies regularly available rather than special occasion luxuries. The same transportation networks that bring settlers also bring the tools necessary for maintaining civilized hygiene standards. Educational campaigns begin teaching children proper hygiene habits in newly established schools, creating a generation that grows up understanding cleanliness as normal rather than aspirational. These children become adults who demand better sanitation standards and create communities where hygiene is expected rather than exceptional. Medical professionals trained in germ theory begin establishing practices in frontier towns, bringing scientific understanding of disease prevention that transforms community health outcomes. These doctors promote hygiene practices based on actual medical knowledge rather than folk wisdom or cultural tradition. The gradual professionalization of services like barbering, midwifery, and food preparation introduces hygiene standards that protect public health while creating economic opportunities for people who understand the commercial value of cleanliness. But the most remarkable change is psychological. Frontier communities begin to believe that they deserve better than constant filth, disease, and the daily struggle against basic sanitation challenges. Hope becomes a powerful force for change when people start imagining a future where cleanliness isn't an impossible luxury, but an achievable standard of civilized life. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen everywhere at the same pace, but by the 1890s, the frontier is becoming something different, something cleaner, healthier, and more optimistic about the possibility that American communities can maintain both rugged independence and basic human dignity. The Wild West is slowly, grudgingly learning to wash itself.